Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to College Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my guest host today, Mr. Clayton Kovatch. And we have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Mr. Ian Harkness from Malvern Preparatory School, a former admissions officer at Gettysburg College. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, guys. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So you bring a great sort of knowledge base to this conversation, which I think is going to be awesome because not only have you done it at the admissions level at college, but now you're guiding students at a very reputable school into the college admissions process. What made you go first from college admissions down to the high school level? And tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, it's a great way to think about just me in general. I mean, I love the outdoors and I love to hike.
Okay.
So even in college, the, opportunity to get out and just explore. Gettysburg was my home in college. I stayed and worked for 10 years almost there in the admission office.
Sure.
I don't know. I feel like this college process is a hike, right? And we're just along for the ride. On the college admission side, that was an opportunity to be able to be there, to read applications, to help them get to hopefully that spot. But the best part about college admissions, at least from my perspective, was always that we were recruiting for that student to go to college. If they chose F&M, they chose Dickinson, if they chose Bucknell, great, right? We knew that they were going to land in a great spot. Now, on the other side of that, it's interesting because I'm working with all of those reps and we're all, close enough to be able to say, hey, I've got some guys that might be interested in all of you. It's much more about the student. I think it's always been that way, but now I get to stand a lot closer to them as we walk, as we journey, as we explore together. Yeah. I think maybe one of the things that I missed the most on the college side was that personal connection. And, it was much more the affinity to the place. The legacy.
Sort of the judge and jury versus the guy pushing the kid to the...
And now I feel like you have to meet the child where they are, right? Meet the family where they are in so many different ways. And I think that's where, being in a high school, having the opportunity to get to meet our students, our families, and help them, wherever they're starting on that journey, it's more fulfilling in a different way.
So I've got to ask one question that's coming hot right now. We preach competition every single day, right? To our clients and to our client base and everybody that listens. How real is competition at the collegiate level for the same student?
I think it depends on the weight class we're talking about. Okay. I think there's a bunch of different, if you look at NACAC data, they show you that the most selective schools are also the most in demand. So if you're talking about that group of, schools admitting 10% or less, even, 15% or less, I mean, they're probably not as hot after certain students, right? It's probably that next band that needs to convince them to, choose my school because we admit 30%. Yeah. We talk a lot about, I think it's different based on where you are. I mean, even now in the world where, schools are closing, those colleges are certainly seeking students in any, place they can find them. But I don't know, that's part of the challenge, right? Finding the right students who match your subset. I mean, I have dozens of examples of students even this year that found the right place just purely by stepping back and understanding who they are first, which I think is missed. When you jump into the process thinking it's only one of those most selective that makes a college good.
Well, and I want to reiterate that point because the first thing we talk about is you have to understand yourself to understand the right social fit, the right academic fit. And then the third part of that wheel is the right financial fit, right? And if you don't understand what you're about, you end up in a place, and we've seen this happen more in the last 2 years than ever before. People not going back after the freshman year, retention rates are way down. Transfer rates are way up, right? So And that's an expensive proposition. I don't always want to come back to money, right? Because it is about the personal growth, satisfaction, all that stuff. But man, if you're spending 50 grand to 80 grand and you end up in the wrong spot, that hurts any pocketbook. I don't care how much money you have.
One student comes to mind immediately who chose a great school pre-COVID, second year of COVID, knew he couldn't learn online, moved back home to the area, is doing incredibly well in landscaping. He runs his own company now, has multiple people working for him. And he said it was the biggest $80,000 check that, he had to write to learn that lesson.
Right. Yeah.
But boy, the financial implications, certainly in today's world, if you don't think about that ahead of time, there's a lot of negative that can come there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, and I was private school educated, so I went through the Devon Prep system. We had, I graduated with 44 guys. We had what I would call concierge service all the time around college. Malvern's a little bigger, but what do you guys do differently in your college admissions process? And what do you think the general public, our listening audience, is parents and students that are college bound, right? Yeah. What do you think set you apart and they should be doing?
Yeah, I think it starts with the Malvern Augustinian roots in understanding yourself. Okay. That reflection. We naturally found our way there this morning, but that's kind of where our conversations start. Whether you come to Malvern in 6th grade, Catholic life is a part of your world, whether you're Catholic or not, right? It does not have to be a front and center part of your everyday life, but certainly the philosophy and the ability to reflect, to step back and to be able to say, even as a 9th or 10th grader, which is where we would start interacting with students as college counselors, this is something that's important. You have to understand yourself before you can make that next step to understand a college and why it would be a good match. For us, we're lucky. We have school counselors and college counselors. It's a really important distinction. I think that not everyone acknowledges in our profession, right? Yeah. School counselors are trained specifically to deal with mental health that I am not as a college counselor, right? I deal with those conversations often, but my background is very much college admission and strategy and marketing, and that end of the counseling spectrum. Maybe thinking about it much more from 12th and 11th, where we have a full suite of school counselors who think about students' social emotional needs, how they're getting to know themselves 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th.
And you made a cool comment that, again, I love sucking out the good stuff. Not that it wasn't all good, but you talked about expertise in marketing, right? Or having an expertise in marketing. And I look at it as one of the biggest things we miss is that's that self-knowledge, self-advocacy. And then it's marketing yourself out to who the right fit is. And so if you're using, and this is in no way to disparage school counselors and psychologists and people that are very much needed now in the mental health world. But the idea that person can do that and guide you to college, that's a tough gig. Yeah. Right. Because there's not enough time for all of it.
Especially when you're dealing with a, caseload of 500 or more students, right? Yeah. That's where the public school system or the state of Pennsylvania or wherever you are listening in the country, state systems don't invest in school counselors in the same way that they should. Right. Part of my background, I was a political science major, was advocating for students, both Harrisburg, DC, for those specific goals, right? You need to invest in students. Long-term, from an economic standpoint, it's in a government's best interest because they're going to pay more taxes, right? To invest even just a little bit more in each student going on. And
you told the story about the one student who had the $80,000 lesson that, hey, I'm going to start my own business and do it. And I want everybody that's listening, and I want to get your agreement on this. So you tell me if you disagree, but not everybody needs to go to college. Correct. Not everybody is for college, right? My brother-in-law is an electrician, has a wildly successful company. He calls himself the Tom Brady of pulling wires, right? If there's a wire to get from point A to point B, he's got it. There's no questions. He didn't go to college. He's got a master electrical cert and he makes more money than I do. So
especially for young men, right? So Malvern and Devon, right? Both dealing specifically with young men, right? There are different challenges in the learning process for young men and different gaps, or even currently in today's world, bigger questions about whether college is the right place. Even in a place like Malvern, where one might look at us and say, it's, this plus Malvern equals destination to any great school, some of the technical conversations, students seeking HVAC, students seeking construction management and other programs that might not be in a 4-year traditional, good college setting, boy, I feel like that's an exciting time because we've had many more of those conversations, and, we're finding that there aren't as many of those options that are out there. Right. Yeah. And there are some locally that do a good job, but boy, we've had some students who have really fallen in love with the construction trades or, working on cars and have gone on to do that work pretty high end, working on Ferraris, if you love F1 and you have an opportunity to work with, cars at that level, why not pursue that? For sure. Even if it's a 2-year degree.
Right. Now, that's not to say that we are anti-college in any way, shape, or form, right? Well, I think it comes back to the initial conversation, which is, do you know yourself?
Correct.
And do you have enough of that self-awareness? And can you advocate well enough for yourself to say, hey, mom, dad, counselor, whoever it is, I'm really passionate about this. And I don't know that going and doing 4 years is the best path for me. And that's, there's a courage that a kid has to have that conversation. And I think that is where we have failed, because we've not taught the courage to stand up and have that conversation at all times. Right.
I mean, and I think maybe it's, parental. For sure. I'm a dad.
So I'm with you.
But I mean, I feel we just filled out the paperwork for our child to apply to their school, right? Mm-hmm. Private Catholic school in the area. But how much of that is shifted to your child and when?
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that's a big part of the college process too, where our expectation is that it's not a mom or a dad, it's the student. It's not an AI bot that's writing the essay. It's,
correct.
It's an opportunity for them to begin to step back and say, this is my story. This is what I value. This is what I love. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't align with a school's expectations or a parent's expectations, then we have those conversations. It's nice to be in a place where we have the support of those school counselors. We have the support and expertise of the college, the college team. But the parents have invested in time and money and energy for the ability to have both of those conversations. Right. And I feel like that's where, if you're not in that specific area, you've got to seek that somewhere else and know yourself enough to say, hey, I need help.
Yeah. I think parents that are listening, right? There are many pathways to success, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you have to, rather than follow the herd all the time, right? You've got to think critically about your situation and your child's situation. Now, I'll give you my parents' whole deal was, we're sending you to Malvern Preparatory School. Mm-hmm. It's meant to prepare you for college. Like, that's the path.
Right.
I got one of the best well-rounded educations, I think, that I've seen, whether it was by serendipitous and a fortunate circumstance. Franklin Marshall wasn't the school that I was intending to go to. I was supposed to go play baseball at William and Mary on a scholarship, and it didn't work out. Mm-hmm. So I think, sometimes it just works out the right way. But I think I was very self-aware of what my pursuit was and what my capabilities were. And so ending up there, I could handle the pressure of the school. Right. I could handle the long nights in the library and all that stuff. But I also watched a lot of kids struggle and not have a lot of fun in college. So again, I think reasonable expectations and a true understanding of what you're trying to achieve is probably the most important thing.
Right.
So go ahead. You got it.
I was going to say, we were talking a little bit beforehand, about the conversation around the schools, the top tier schools. Everyone said, I want my kid to go, XYZ. What do you find those conversations like now, whether it's with the students or the parent, where, there's a name where we say fit, not fame on the school, right? There's a name recognition, but you find that maybe there are some lesser known colleges out there or universities that really are a great fit for that student.
Yeah. There's dozens of those that come to mind, right? I think it's just more about, from a college counselor standpoint, I feel like those reach schools or those popular schools naturally come to mind, right? That you're going to find them. You're going to see them. They're going to, be top of mind in any conversation on a sideline of a football game. Maybe it's college game day, which I feel like is driving a lot of the push to the big Southern schools. Whatever that might be. I mean, I think from my perspective, we have to meet the family where they are, right? So if you're thinking good school equals selectivity, we have a conversation about what else might make a school good, right? Or the opportunity to be able to step back and say, great, this is selectivity. That tells you one piece of the puzzle. But what about retention? What about, opportunities for a scholarship or an honors college designation that might give you a significant scholarship at, University of South Carolina comes to mind there, where their honors program for a top student, it's less than $80,000.
And we interviewed the director of South Carolina, and there's a point there that brings to mind something that I preach all the time, and I want to get your opinion on this. And then I have a second follow-up question with Malvern specifically. People get so enamored with college ranking in niche and in U.S. News and World Report. And I argue that you can't tell me the difference between the top 100 schools education. You cannot definitively say this is better and here's why, because I have met very successful people at every level. And so what are we really judging a school based on? Because in my opinion, it should be happiness, success, and financial freedom post-college.
Correct.
But we don't take those statistics. We don't measure the net worth of someone after. We don't measure the joy they get in their position after that. What we measure is how hard was it to get into?
Yeah.
And did you get into the post-grad? Follow-up to that is a child that is going post-grad, right? Different thought pattern. You got to think about the segue. If you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, you want to get a PhD, got to be a different conversation. It doesn't just lead to go to the absolute best school or the highest ranked school, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a time when, you could write the check potentially if you were in a certain, upper middle class. I don't know if that's the time now. $90,000 per year.
And we're going to tip six figures,
right? Very soon. I think about that as a dad, right? And what am I going to need to do in a few years? But I don't know. You're investing in the brand. Essentially, what you're doing is you're paying for that selectivity in some way, right? And does it pay off on the other end? I'm not sure we have data that really suggests all of that, right? I think there are so many great schools that are not ranked in the top 50 U.S. News that produce the same type of ROI and maybe are even better at engaging you as a student, right? And F&M comes to mind, right? A University of Richmond comes to mind where, the research opportunity with a professor where you're able to just dive in and get to know someone who will personally recommend you for that graduate program. You have to know that the price tag is going to work, but it might not be the, Harvard, Yale, Princeton that is so brand that, maybe the resume piece gives you a bump in certain instances, but there are others will give you the experience that in the resume, maybe that gets you to what you're seeking.
I talk about the network a lot too. Some schools have just phenomenal alumni networks, right?
Yeah.
Some schools don't.
Yeah.
And, I'll use Penn State as the example, right? And
one of the largest
networks. And it is sickening how Penn State it is. It's sickening is the wrong word, but it's funny to watch. It's almost like when you watch two people riding Harley Davidsons down the road and they do their little wave or whatever, the Jeep wave. It's like the Penn State. We are Penn State. And but that network carries clout.
It does.
Right. And so what is the objective of a good education? To get out, to be educated, to be employed, and to be, quote unquote successful, however you measure success.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I feel like, you can connect to more people if you're involved in some of those larger networks, but how personal is that, right?
Huge.
A smaller institution, and this isn't just making the case for those smaller institutions, but, it's an opportunity for an individual to suggest, hey, work with this person in our network who, I don't know, maybe that's been one of the bigger challenges in the last 10 years for colleges is to prove that they have those networks that are viable for, getting a student experience in medical school, specifically for medical school.
Yeah.
You have to have that, 1,000 hours or more to be able to be competitive, right? When you're applying to med school. So, while you're in college, you not only have to crush your courses, get A's, and even organic chemistry, right? Get that A, but also get 1,000 or more hours, right? I don't know. How do you do that? How do you, without someone specifically saying, do it, right? Yeah. Or I am your guide. You can get that at the big university as well, but it's just that proactive nature that you would need.
Yeah.
Or have to.
So all my friends went to Penn State. I was the outlier that went to the small liberal arts college, right? Now, what I will say, and I want to get your opinion on this because this is baffling to me, but people dog on liberal arts colleges like it's because it says the word liberal that it is some liberal meaning to it.
That's a good point.
It doesn't mean that, right? It means teaching you how to think. It's the whole premise behind it is multiple subject areas, having to be critical thinkers, and the whole sort of organic nature of learning and thinking and applying, right?
Yep.
Do you guys get pushback on that?
Not with the liberal part necessarily. Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely think that's a big thing nationally, right? Where, or I'm hopeful at some point that there's a resurgence for all liberal arts colleges, that people recognize exactly what you just said. Yeah, it's okay to go to college and actively participate in the university, go to the game.
Yeah.
But it's a very different thing when you're graded on how many times you don't show up, right? I mean, in class, I knew that I could not miss 3 classes or else I would lose significantly in terms of a grade, if not fail for that section of the class. And I don't know, that intentionality that I feel like is important for arguably 4 of the most exciting but biggest growth years of a child's life or a young adult's life. Boy, it's an opportunity to explore, but it's an opportunity also to gather those other mentors. And I think back about my own college days, that's professors, it's others who I got to know, not even, directly as a mentor, but just someone who, in the moment in time as a fellow coach, that helped guide or help offer some suggestions. But boy, that personal approach is where we're at.
I mean, I remember freshman year, I took Econ 101 with the chair of the econ department. I was told not to do it because he's the hardest professor on campus. I was like, well, that's great. Like, that means he's probably good, tenured, whatever. And it was 8 to 8:50 every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm a freshman now. And he would call you out. Like, I didn't see you Wednesday. Where were you Friday? And like instantaneously the executive function, he's got to be there, because if you can't get out of bed and get to class, you're going to fail it. Yeah. And the other sort of point I'll make is I had a class, it was economic game theory, fascinating subject matter. There were 6 of us. We did it at my professor's dining room table where his wife cooked us dinner. Like, it's just a different level of sort of that connection. And I don't know that I show up in a 500 room auditorium or 500 person auditorium to learn
game theory.
Right. Like, I just don't know that happens. So again, I'm not, I am certainly an advocate for liberal arts education. I think it is by far the most well-rounded environment that people can go into. In terms of, and this is the follow-up question I wanted to ask. This one hits a little, and if you can't answer it, you can't answer it. How much pressure do you get from Malvern, with its reputation being where it is, very high, right, to get kids to the Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Bucknell, and like, how much pressure is on you to do that?
I mean, I think the pressure is less from a Malvern, or from a board, right? That might exist at certain schools. That does not exist in my world in the same way as one might imagine. It probably is my style as much as anything, or at least our approach, our philosophy is much more about, I don't know, like, we do not have the magic bullet to get a kid in anywhere.
Yep.
And I say that often. Parents, I think students, the pressure for me is much more from the student. Like, boy, did we get enough target schools on your list for you to have a really good financial safety to then compare to those other schools that might be the $90,000 price tag? I don't know. That's the pressure that I feel like that I feel more. What's interesting about Malvern is, unlike other independent schools, we are looking at fit in a very different way for students coming to us. So the Catholic piece could be there. It could be athletic talent that might get you through that door. I don't know. It could be a test score. It might not be, right? The student might not submit a test score to be admitted at Malvern, but have other qualities that they're really bringing to the table. So we're working with students not just who have been trimmed at our own admission gate, but any student who finds their way to our door. So their needs are very different. It's not just the creme de la creme, right? Where that is the only successful or destination that could be good.
Right.
Boy, I think of a lot of students and just saying that, but I think what we want to do is help them see who they are and how that aligns. If it aligns, they'll know it, they'll feel it when they're on that campus, and then respond as they're coming back and saying, I really like this. Great. These 3 schools you'll love in the same way, or if not, we want to continue the conversation to make sure that there's others that you can, begin to feel, because I think that's an important part of the process, stepping foot on a campus and knowing I could see myself here, learning here. And if you can't, the ability to be able to just say, I want more, like that.
Yeah.
The happiness factor, maybe.
Yep. Sorry. Go ahead, Clay.
No, I was going to say, so with the timeline you guys have, obviously it's going to be a little bit different from most public schools, and the fact that, you're specifically assisting students through that college prep process. What ideally for you is the timeline you take the students through? Obviously you get to work with them for a while.
Yeah. But
when does that really start in your world?
So 9th and 10th grade, we have varying styles with that group. 9th grade, I think, is a really good time for any student to get to know themselves. So whether you're in our world of college counseling, if we're having a conversation, typically at Malvern, that's a conversation with a school counselor, right? So it's mental health. It's making sure you're launching properly. For young men in 9th grade, boy, what an awkward year, right? Growth, maturity, who knows what other complexities are in that mix. I think it's a year to start to test, and we encourage families to go visit a couple of schools, right? It's a chance to step foot on a city campus or a rural campus and know that that's something that you don't do or don't like. For 10th graders, we'll have those first meetings really in the spring. It's an opportunity for them to come and, jump into 10th grade year, taking a step forward and knowing themselves a little more. In the school counseling curriculum in 9th grade, they're also doing some of that evaluation of careers and, career assessments and what am I good at? What are my styles, right? There's a couple learning, online opportunities for students to get to know themselves in that way. 10th grade, they're going to meet with their college counselor for the first time. We actually host a panel. We bring college reps to campus, usually those who know us well, just to kind of offer a chance for parents to get to know them, or a chance to hear from someone that's not me, right? I can say these things until I'm blue in the face, but, fresh college counselor or admission counselor comes from a school, brand new, and says the same thing, and it's believed, right? It's an interesting dilemma. End of 10th grade is also a time when they're starting to think about making commitments, taking maybe some test prep over the summer to plan for the beginning of 11th grade. So those conversations are really more college focused and starting to think about, all right, what are the right matches? We're also lucky in 11th and 12th grade to have a college seminar class. It's 10 classes with each junior. We just finished literally, last week. And it's, a chance for them to begin the essay with us. It's a chance for us to talk about college lists. We give them a case study. We actually make them admit, waitlist, and deny. They're given 4 mock applicants and they have to figure out why would they admit this student and not another.
Interesting.
So it's an opportunity for us to be able to engage them in a conversation in a very different way. I've got some ideas about AI essays next year and giving them a couple of examples that have been submitted to say, hey, what do you think about this essay? And seeing if they can spot it, right? We're lucky to have that time. Not every school does, but it's part of that timeline and that growth as they get closer to 12th grade. 12th grade, it's purely application submission and trying to finalize those lists and getting to the finish line. But that's another 10 hours with us in a class, in addition to the one-on-one support, that they would seek.
So I got to reiterate this because we at our company, between the College Planning Network, Elite Collegiate Planning, and everything that we do, we preach this constantly. And here you have a school where there is 20 hours of directed classroom around college admission, essay development, college list development, all those subject matters. But there's introductory meetings in sophomore year. There is self-awareness meetings in freshman year. There are like we use the Myers-Briggs Strong Interest Inventory as our sort of baseline. We want to figure out what will you be happy and satisfied doing. And I think everybody listening, if your school's not doing that, they're not doing it right. And I don't mean to say they're doing it wrong, but they're not doing it the way they would like to do it. I can promise you that much. And I have been speaking in front of guidance counselors, and their gripes are the same, right? We don't have enough time. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough people. We can't do what we'd like to do. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that you sort of just laid it out in a timetable that's like, yeah, we're jumping on it. We're starting freshman year. We're not delaying. Now, you're not getting intense, like go visit 15 colleges and make sure you do the tours. You're saying get to a campus, check it out, feel it, like understand the aura, get familiar.
I mean, and there's a certain level of engagement that we hope or expect, but don't always get, right? Yep. So I think that's also a part of the mix as well. When the family chooses to tune in, the support is there, but if they're jumping in full force end of junior year, it's a different conversation to try to catch them up. Like, where should we visit? We haven't been on any college campus yet. I don't know. We assume that they come to our programming and we share all that information, but we're constantly thinking about, are these types of podcasts or virtual presentations equally as important as being on campus to see the panel, right? Yeah. We struggle with those conversations, but at the same time, I think, the support is there. It's more about when does the student clue in, right? That, it is important my junior year to have an essay draft done, right? Because I'm steps ahead.
Well, and that's the whole point of this podcast. It was conceived to, hey, let's peel back the layers of the onion. Let's tell people how it is from the people that know. Right?
Well, I think the big misconception that I hear a lot is, at least for a lot of families, I see a very, very rough shift where the panic button gets pulled out of the closet and we realize, SATs are coming up, time to start talking about college, and we're almost done junior year.
Yeah.
But you guys take them through a process to kind of get their feet wet, see what it's like. Not necessarily you need to know exactly what you're going to be and what you're going to do by 9th or 10th grade, but it sounds like you put them kind of in the driver's seat to see how it all works, have them look at the admissions process from the other side and get familiar.
There is a photo that I share often. It's an image of a student panicked in the driver's seat. So I love that word. And a counselor in the back seat and a parent next to that student, and just kind of an interesting way to think about it. I love that as much as I love the hiking. And, I share a photo of a Sherpa in the Himalayas with a ton of weight on their back, right? I feel like that's us, right? We get to carry a bit of that weight and help students see those bigger picture things. But, wherever they are, it's just, how do we help them make the next step? Maybe the other subtlety at Malvern is the percent of athletes, right, that are in the mix as well. That just changes their timeline, right?
Yeah, 100% it does.
Division I lacrosse recruits, their timeline opens September 1st. So that first week of school, not only are our juniors coming back, what's the first time they're eligible to talk to those coaches, they're coming back and having calls from the top of the best schools and trying to figure out, where do I want to go? Harvard, Yale, or Georgetown, right? And it's all in the beginning of their junior year. So we've had to adapt and still try to adapt to try and accommodate and make sure that we're there working with our coaches, or at least trying to offer our insights when families are getting there sometimes sooner than anticipate. But
we can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started. Yeah, and it's different for different sports too. So there's a whole, and any parent that's listening that has an athlete and you are considering athletics, you really got to plug in, and you got to pay attention to the NCAA. You got to pay attention to clearinghouse dates. You got to pay attention to how that whole system works, because it can come at you real fast.
Right.
And the other thing in my experience with NCAA and scholarship and all that, like, when it hits, it hits. Yeah. And there is, like, you've got days, weeks at most to make decisions. And so if you haven't vetted and validated what you're doing prior to that, like, you can catch yourself going, I don't know.
As you travel around to, club events in the 9th grade or 10th grade year, if they're not on a college campus, stop by the local college campus.
Yep.
Find that school in the Carolinas as you travel through and just see what Duke or UNC or Elon or High Point looks or feels like, right? Yeah. Just because I think that's a really good strategy for those students, just to know, all right, this is too big. That's too small.
Yeah. I tell people, when you're going on vacation, go by way of college.
Yeah.
Drive through. You don't even have we drove the whole family in the family roadster down to Florida, and we went through JMU.
Yeah.
Then we hit and went through Georgia Tech. Yeah. And then we went through Tallahassee and saw UF, and it was just like, hey, here's 3 completely different institutions. Yeah. What do you think? Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great philosophy, just a way to do it. Right. And I don't know. I think you got to believe it. You got to engage in it. I think that's the piece where, if it's junior year, it's maybe not too late. But we feel like
certainly not early.
No, that jumpstart junior year for us is the most important piece. Knowing that a student is stressing about where senior year rather than doing the application and essay and everything else starting, September 1 senior year.
And I'll give an opinion and a personal story on this. One of the concerns that a lot of people come to us with is like, my kid doesn't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, listen, everybody in their world has been asking them the same question. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And they just shut down. And one of the ways in which we empower students to have that self-awareness and to have that confidence to have the conversation is early exposure to things, right? So, and specifically positive things like college campuses. So my kids talk about it all the time. Right. We drive through. It's not like I made them take a tour or put the name of it. We just said, hey, check that out. Look at the football stadium. Check this out. Look at those buildings. How nice is that? And then we drove through Georgia Tech and I said, hey guys, this is one of the best engineering schools in the country. Like, you ever think about being an engineer? This is the type of place you want to come. Mm-hmm. And so now at 12 years old, my daughter, who's going into 7th grade, we have open conversations about it. And it's not something that is going to be this mad rush, this truncated window of stress and anxiety that's going to add in. It's just part of the conversation.
I think, you've done a good job of building that trust with your daughter. I think when it comes later, or if that conversation bubbles up later, my advice is always create that time to have the conversation. So if it's a Sunday evening dinner, that's the tradition for the family, that's the college conversation time. Keep it to that. Right. I think I've watched it with my own family as I've been a college advisor for them, right? It's one of the craziest conversations at the Thanksgiving table when, us cousins, uncles, or others are asking about, hey, where are you going? Where are you applying? Why don't you do this? Why don't you change your essay and write about this instead? We tell our faculty not to ask that question at certain times of the year. Not for them to not be engaged but just because of that pressure, knowing it's coming from every angle.
Yep. And other advice I give to every student, if you're a student and you're listening to this is the best thing you can do. Tell them exactly what your made up plan is, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, like, hey, I intend to go to law school. So my idea is I'm going to go to Georgetown, and it shuts it down. They're like, oh my God, that kid's got his head on his shoulders. And it just gives you that space. So and I'm not saying to lie about it, but have some intention and you can stop the madness.
So one of the things that we tell our seniors right in the beginning of the year is spin the question back to the person asking it.
There you go.
So your uncle's asking you, why are you doing this? Ask him, why did you go to the school you chose?
Brilliant.
And because that allows them, who doesn't like to talk about themselves, first of all, but an opportunity to give, just advice by talking, and the student doesn't have to feel like they're backed into a corner.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's easing a bit of that stress.
Yeah. Well, it's brilliant too, because you get perspective, and that's something we miss in society a lot anymore is perspective, right? Yep. I want to see things from other people's lenses. Mm-hmm. I think you gain insight, knowledge, and awareness when you are like, Clay, your opinion is different than your opinion. Like Niall's opinion is different than mine. So you can learn as you do that. So I love the reverse.
Yeah, that's genuinely how I found my school was I did shut down. I remember it because I thought it was going to be delivered to me on a silver platter at some point from whether it be the counselors or someone else.
STEM.
And somebody say, hey, here's where you should be looking. So when it started to come up, I remember shutting down, but I did ask a lot of people. And that's how I found the school I went to, is just by asking, and I never would have found that had I not done so. But
and there's so much data to support it, but you have to be in the right frame of mind and know where to look and know why I'm even looking in that space, right? We can advise or we can provide tools all we want, but until a student jumps in to say, oh, okay, now I'm going to look at how my colleagues did using that scattergram data to see, oh, wow, okay, I kind of fit in a good zone. It's a target school.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things that I have found that was very frustrating. Why we created our Search Faster technology at the College Planning Network is because you can find a lot of information that gives you no answers, right? You can, if you want to see college list, you can type in, give me the top 10 schools in this, and it'll kick back to you. But that doesn't mean anything to you, the individual. That just means someone else's opinion of that ranking. And so we did it based on a way where I really care about a couple of things, right? I want to know what does the school care about, right? How do they want me to get in, right? What matters to them? I want to know all the financial data, right? I want to know their endowments. I want to understand how the finance in that school works, because each school is unique in how they manage their money, but they do have to be solvent, right? So they've got to create solvency in every freshman class they bring in. And then the last thing I really want to know is like, what's the return on investment? Like, how long till employment? Like, what's the average 6-month employment rate? What's the average starting salary? How much debt do people typically graduate with? And if you look, and so we built our whole database and system at the College Planning Network with the Search Faster technology. Basically, you can search that, and all that data is populated in a way that says, here's this school as it pertains to you, as opposed to here's this school ranked against this school, right? And it matters.
But if you haven't visited, I feel like it's all really good data. But even using our examples of Gettysburg F&M, right? Like, go visit both places and you'll probably walk away with similar but unique feelings.
100%.
So awesome. If you look on paper, they probably are very similar. But boy, like, I feel like if you're relying on a ranking, it doesn't give you the full picture.
No shot. Right?
Absolutely. Lancaster and Gettysburg are different towns, are different feels. And I think, just those, I think what's also important is, maybe when we're helping families, what I think we can bring to the mix is a little bit of the knowledge of what's also changing in the college space.
Yeah, let's go there.
Or at least in terms of even those smaller places, right? That are, I don't know. I think that's, it's the automation maybe that the process is suggesting or wanting to, whether it's AI or other things that they're just trying to spot, or the SRAR, right? So if someone doesn't know, the self-reported academic record is used at dozens of schools and prevents us from sending a transcript, right? So as a counselor, I can't send the formal, XYZ, ABC courses and grades, but it relies on a student to impact and input that for them. It makes it easier for the colleges, but boy, how do you stand out in that type of process?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, if that automation's coming.
So let's talk about some of the changes beyond, because the one, and this was an interview I did with the admissions. I think I don't know that he was director level, but he was in the admissions at F&M, and he was talking about the advancement of sort of algorithmic AI, statistical analysis. I call it the Moneyball approach to college, right? Which is using data to create sort of this knowledge of this child's a fit. They have a very high probability of attending if accepted. They gain a letter, right? Because we're 97% sure, based on our statistics and everything we've learned, that if we admit that person, they will come. And if they come, we're 95% sure they can afford X. And so we'll meet the delta and boom, we've got a fit. And so that's the college yield thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge deal, because prior to that, back when you started at Gettysburg, you guys spread it out on the table. You looked at the applications. Everything was very, and it's probably still organic to some extent at these types of schools, but man, statistics are playing a role, and AI is also generating some of those outputs.
Yeah. And I think it's, again, depending on what caliber, what tier we're talking about, things vary, right? How much is the essay weighing in versus a letter of recommendation or the transcript? The transcript still, wherever you're applying, is still the number one most important. How tough were your classes, or how tough was the climb
against the rigor of opportunity?
Right. But colleges have gotten so smart, and maybe, to your point earlier about, like, as students are seeking the right school, there's so many different tools that exist for them. There are so many more tools for colleges to find the right student now, right? That the search market from their perspective is very, very different in a world of AI, but also in a world of just like, opportunities for bigger companies that are looking for kids differently or helping them, match a certain personality profile, right? College Board does a lot of that. A lot of the bigger companies in higher ed are offering some type of personality match, not just a score or a number. That is hard to understand for a student. I think it's hard to understand for us. But when it comes down to their algorithm, they're guarding against admitting the student who has not shown any interest or engaged or in other ways, whatever that number looks like. We tell our students, you have to raise your hand. You have to sign in. You've got to, if a student, we have around 100 colleges come to visit us at Malvern every year. If you are on campus and don't just pop in, even just sign in and say, I have to run to my physics test, you've missed an opportunity to demonstrate or at least engage. Not every school is using that in the same way, but an opportunity to shake a hand, one of 10.
I want to hit on that demonstrated interest for a minute, because for all of the schools that said it wasn't important, it is, they are using it. Whether they're heavily weighting or partially weighting, they are using it without question today. With the COVID scenario that played out, right? The schools were forced into a technological shift, not only in the classroom setting to have to go online, but they were also forced. You couldn't visit the campus. You couldn't do any of that stuff. And once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't just jam those statistics away.
Right.
You're manipulating them differently now. Okay, did they do all of these things, and did they visit, and did they shake the hand and sign the paper of the person that was on their campus? That is all coming into play for sure, because it's at the end of the day, the business end of college, and I don't want to get too down on it, but the business end of college is about yield. They have to fill, they have a certain, and this is from F&M again, we've got 560 beds. We need to fill 560 beds. That is our target. That is what now we could do a variable from 530 up to, but 560 is a max. We've got to fill those beds. Right. So they don't want to send out 50 admission letters to get one person back.
Correct.
Their goal is to send 50 to get 50.
Yeah.
Right. That's the goal of every institution.
Yeah. I think that math is always the hardest to predict. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the number, it's the discount rate. Right.
100%.
So they're thinking about, how am I going to get.
Say that again. It's the what rate?
The discount rate. Right. So the discount rate is probably the most important factor in net tuition revenue, right? So if you ask a dean of admission what keeps them up at night, I always love the answers, but oftentimes it comes back to NTR, net tuition revenue. That's the percent that they're putting into their own financial aid to attract the class and to enroll that class, not just the 530, right?
God, I love this.
So the other part that I would push back to your demonstrated interest part is like from the college perspective, it's less about demonstrated interest and what I would call demonstrated engagement now.
Yeah.
So not just
fair point.
It includes all those pieces, but maybe where, I don't know, I'm scared for the future of our students and for our sanity. How many times did you click on the email that we sent you?
How many Facebook Live events did you attend?
Did you spend 20 minutes on this link clicking through, or did you not at all? And so that engagement score that a college can see pretty easily if they've already invested in the technology is hard to ignore. But how many of our students are actually looking at their email long enough to say, oh, this is Elon, and they're going to send me 5 more messages that they want me to click on. A scenario where a certain school in the South in New Orleans did not admit a student who was highly qualified because of that engagement score, right?
Yep.
So I don't know, a lot of different examples of
I think the point that you need to refine there, or that we need to refine there, is every business in this country has the capability of sending an email and telling how long you were on that email. Did you click into it? Did you go into sublinks? How deep down that rabbit hole did you go in the Google Analytics and all that stuff? And so these aren't counselors, or these aren't admissions officers sitting on the other end of the computer measuring this. This is a number thrown at them, right? This is just, hey, here's what we show. And if they can correlate any average to that, that correlation is not them doing it. They're not doing it. It's not a human doing the correlation. It is a computer telling them,
right?
This correlates to person not wanting to come, not clicking enough, not attending those events. I tell everybody, no matter what school you're looking at, take everyone as seriously as you take the one you absolutely want to go to. Right. And I love to advise people to create a separate email for students, like, Dave College 123 at gmail.com. And that's what you put on everything. So when you go in there, the only thing you should see in there are college. And so you monitor that one more than you do others.
Or even, just make sure that that's where you only see those schools that you care the most about. Right. And I think that's a big challenge for all of us, keeping up with an email. But, maybe a lesson that we don't teach in class is the importance of that, right? In today's world, or even, it's my biggest fear, and my hope in my heart is with those admission counselors being trained properly, and I don't know, but in a profession where that group is underpaid and overworked and, over traveled. That was one of the reasons why I got out of college admissions, just to try and have more stability in life. And, that 8 to 3 school time frame is much better than traveling to 5 different cities in a week and college fairs at 7:00 each night, and it wears on you, right? No doubt. Who is reading is another big part of this process that is often overlooked.
Yeah. So I want to revert back to net tuition revenue.
Yeah.
God, I love it. And there was an interview done by the director of financial aid at Lafayette. And he said I want you guys to understand this point, and I think you can relate it back to net tuition revenue and talk more in depth about it than I can. But he said for most of the admissions process, for the initial part of the admission, we lead with idealism, right? We want the best student. We have all intentions of bringing the best, the ones that are going to be the most impactful. But at about middle of November, early December, they lead with logic. And they realize that if these people are going to be accepted, we will have negative net tuition revenue. And so we have to then change and say, we've got to get some other people that can afford to pay a little bit more money into this to accept what we want. And it has to be a mix, right? I firmly believe that's every school. But they will tell you we're need blind, we're this, and I don't buy it, but give us some insight.
Yeah, I think that there is a small subset of schools that can afford to be need blind.
Yeah, well, $50 billion in endowment funds will do it.
Whether or not they're actually need blind in the selection process, if for each student, is still a question, right? They may talk about it in that way. I agree. Like, ask them a very pointed question and you might get a different answer. They're probably need blind for most of the selection and evaluation process, right? It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you can afford, but maybe there is someone in that financial aid conversation at the elevated level, dean's level, that has to pay attention to how much money we're spending, even if you have $1 billion, $50 billion endowment.
Yep.
The reality is for most colleges, and we're seeing it every week now, unfortunately, is that the bottom line or that tuition number matters so much.
Yep.
And the crunch potentially has come for most that are struggling around how much have we given back, right? So that balance of discount rate, it's a number that probably is never talked about in terms of financial viability for a school. But if they're discounting at a certain higher level, you can see that in their common data set. You can look at it and understand, oh my goodness, what's going on here, right? It doesn't always tell you the full picture.
No.
But at the same time, I think it's one of those pieces that in today's climate, you have to be aware of.
Yeah. We use the common data set and we use the iPads data and we pulled it and merged it all together and we pulled out what actually matters. And under the financial aid tab on the Search Faster tool, there is a piece that says percent of students that are given any grant or scholarship. And when it says 100%, we call it Kohl's cash, right? You will not pay sticker at that school. That is just not, their sticker price is actually probably less, but they have to keep up with the Joneses. So they inflate their price to keep up competition and all that. So it's real. It is, there is a business end of this that people, I think for the longest time, like college and universities, it's not business. It's about education and the growth of society and all that. But when you see schools shut down, just straight up sold, gone, done, no more find a different school. We're out of business next year. We got one locally that just did it, right? Money matters.
Couple locally, right? Or bigger universities, hopefully saving one. But boy, I feel like there's other examples of just purchasing, or shifting. we probably should, as an industry, in a time of or demographic decline, see some of those schools not survive, right? For the sake of the future of higher education. Yep. What's changing from the recruitment side is when I was coming up through over the last 20 years, it was much more about collaboration. I feel like the business model, which we have to talk about in some way for the colleges, F&M and Gettysburg would collaborate a lot more, or colleges in general would collaborate. There are great national organizations, NACAC, PACAC. Yep. PACAC's conference in the Poconos in a few weeks is going to be 400 people, right? All talking this language from all across the country. It's an important piece to just understand the landscape, but if you can't afford to pay those scholarships, then are your admissions reps able to be there and be a part of the conversation? Yeah. I don't know. You got to be a part of it, I think.
Well, I was taught a lesson by my father a while back, and was talking about HR, and he's an attorney and he worked for big corporation. And he said, when the HR was kept at bay, you were able to run the company the way you want. The moment you let HR out of the box, and this is not to dog on HR in any way. This is just, when you let it govern, it will govern. It has to govern the rules and everything in place. It does what it does. And I think what people fail to understand is that in higher ed, business and money govern how you can do it, and so it has to. Because if not, you have an insolvent institution. And guess what? The moment that happens, we're watching it happen now. And I think your point is very well received, where some of them have to go away. They're not pulling the weight. They're not doing what they need to do. And they're out of business.
Supply and demand, right? Yeah. I mean, I think it's that basic economics we have been in a time of demographic increase, right? 2008 changed that. The financial crisis, fewer students were born that year and every year after, right? So it's not a cliff as people have described it. I think it's a definite step back and a decline, but the shifts in Pennsylvania are significant. The shifts in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic are significant. Yep. So wherever you are in the college world, if you're a dean of admission, you have to be thinking about all of those pieces and then some, right? The landscape is not what it was 5 years ago pre-COVID, and it's certainly not what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. It has to be more cutthroat, or at least institution specific and less collaborative.
Well, and the funny part about that is I get the question all the time on, like, where's the bubble? When's the bubble going to burst in college tuition? But it's not a bubble. Yeah. And that's what people don't understand. It's not like the other financial bubbles we see where we're arbitrarily printing money, increasing interest rates. Those are bubbles and boom and bust scenarios. At the college level, right, you have these leaders of the pack that have almost endless endowments. They have 60,000 applicants for 5,000 spots or 3,000 spots. Talk about supply and demand. Yeah. When the demand for that education is as high as it is, the supply is going to be limited. The price is going to rise.
That's how Penn State right now as a perfect example of, I say the way they go through is stamp, because it's families everywhere applying to that school. The volume, and I'm sure you see that now main campus, that school is
not easy to get into.
Most popular place for us still.
Oh yeah.
But, and I think, in some way, like the price point, right, for that in-state option, we're always talking about with our students, right? You can't look at colleges, you can't think about financial fit and not consider your in-state public options. Pennsylvania is funky because we have
we have two different systems, but
in many ways, I think to your point, like the ability to pay is different than the willingness to pay. And if you are planning ahead and you have the ability to write that $90,000 check or $100,000 check or whatever it's going to be in 5 or 10 years, where will you choose to spend that? And what's a good enough school?
And what's the opportunity cost too?
And I think that's maybe where, I don't know, that keeps dean of admission up at night, or that was the constant conversation for us when I was still in the admission world. Even now though, right? I mean, as we think about like a family, that what's a good enough school? My dad will write the check for Villanova. Will they write it for another school that's similar price tag without that big scholarship? Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's,
well, and there's a comparative analysis that needs to be done anytime you face the decision of let's use Villanova, Penn State, because they're both well known in the country, but they're also very local to us. Villanova at $89,000 or 87,000, wherever its price is right now. It's north of 85. I know that. Versus Penn State, let's say 38, let's say topping out at 40, depending on the program, whatever. Is one twice as good as the other? Because by price, that's essentially what you're saying. And so I'm not saying Villanova's not a right fit for someone. I'm not saying Penn State's not a right fit, but I'm just saying, are we being critical in that nature with it? My dad taught me a valuable lesson in wine, a lot of wisdom from this man. But he put $100 bottle of wine on the table and he put a $25 bottle of wine and didn't tell me the price. And we poured it out, had a little tasting. And I said, well, I think they're both very good. I mean, maybe I like this one better. He goes, do you like it 3 times better? Do you like it 4 times better? Because that's the cost of that. And so, like, are we being practical and logical about colleges all the time? No. And I think that's where you get the fame, not fit, fit versus fame, right?
I think that's the healthy conversation to start a college, or frame just the scope of what is within realm for any family, right? If, they're more likely to pay that at the higher ranked schools, that's one thing to talk about. But then which higher ranked school at that price tag would be the best fit, right? My conversations often are coming at it from the likely or target part of their list, right? Because that's where I feel like I can offer a school that might not be there be as obvious to the family, but might offer that scholarship that might give them that comparable something, right? It's that art and science that makes our profession quite interesting, right?
Absolutely it is.
It's very much from the admission side or from the counseling side, right? Because every student is different and complex in their own way. But it makes it fun, right?
Well, and let's not, we can't have this conversation without talking about the variety and amount of institutions in this country. We're very fortunate as education is very accessible in terms of how many institutions there are and what you can matriculate to. But when you go on our system, like the first thing, it populates every school that we have in the system, which is like 3,782 schools, right? There's no possible way that someone knows all those schools, right? And so how do we sort, sift, and deliver? And I use a sort of a grading scale. I tell people, pick 5 pieces of criteria, pick 10. Parents, you pick your 5 or 10. Student, you pick your 5 or 10. And when you go, grade the school on your 5 or 10 most important things. Start to build some way to compare one to the next on what they are. Because again, I'll go back to the Dickinson, F&M, Bucknell, Lafayette,
the great Pennsylvania liberal arts schools, right?
All great schools. You're going to get a good education in any of them. But how do you compare one to the other?
You have to see them. You have to feel them.
Got to see it, feel it. Got to talk to a professor on campus. You got to see, are they welcoming? Like, a lot of times, and that's where I think the COVID kids lost out because they couldn't. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So last question I'll ask, what types of tools do you use at Malvern that you think set you apart and give you a good capability to do this?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the tools are much more those one-on-one and then opportunities to connect in the classroom. Students know me, they know we can talk college, and I talk college all the time. I feel like it's a good thing, but it's also a curse when you go to the football game and you're talking
like,
college.
Oh, by the way, can I steal you for a second?
But I don't know. I think that openness, I think there's always that opportunity to just know that, we're there to support you in any question anyway for our families. The tools, I mean, we do invest, we're in a space where we can invest in a little bit of test prep. So we help students who might not necessarily be able to afford that option or might not think to say, I might be a strong tester. How do I know that? Oh, wow, we can see you're a strong tester. Let us help support you as you think about, even 4 or 8 courses to help you understand the test. We're doing little things like that, but boy, I think it's as much about like understanding that this process is, an adventure and an experience rather than a set X, Y, and Z to follow. We continually try and, remind families of that like when you're curious, raise your hand, reach out. And if that's 9th grade, we understand what that means, but our response is very different than an 11th grader or a 12th grader. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And you just gave the best plug for what we do privately. So we're in the private sector, right? We help people that don't have that. And my takeaway is it's the people. It's the guide,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going on a wilderness journey here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You doing it alone? You better know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
You're going up Mount Everest.
Mm-hmm.
You going no oxygen, no Sherpa,
No way.
Right.
Right.
And so you need these people around you to give you sound advice and at least tell you, hey, here's a step I might take.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? Right.
Yeah. Go to your counselor. If you're in the public school, ask the questions. But if, that support is certainly for us, both and, it's someone who can support you in that space mentally, emotionally, and with the college knowledge as well.
In all of the discussion I've had, and I've talked to a lot of guidance counselors, or they don't call them guidance counselors anymore. They call them
school counselors.
Counselors, right? I got yelled at in a group where we're not guidance counselors.
Yeah.
They want to talk college. Like they yearn for it. And what they want is a motivated student to come to them. And I know just from my own experience in life, self-advocacy, if you have the question, go to your counselor. They want to help. They want to be engaged in it. They love that conversation because some of the ones they have to have are not awesome, right?
Make the most of that opportunity. But so what's interesting about, becoming a school counselor, that's like the certification in the state of Pennsylvania says school counselor, which is probably why they push back some way. But like that certification doesn't require anyone to have even an elective course in college admissions or understanding the college process.
Right.
So if I'm a school counselor being trained in the state of Pennsylvania, I might learn that in my internship at Downingtown because there are 100 recruiters coming through the doors in the fall when I happen to be there. Certain schools do have an elective class that you might choose to take. But the expectation is that as a school counselor, like to your point, like 80% of your time might be the college questions, even though you're trained in social emotional support and helping to deal with crisis and doing the other really important things that have to happen in a school, in addition to scheduling and, course questions and all that kind of good stuff. I don't know. It's almost an impossible job, especially when you're not trained in the way,
no doubt,
in the way that we might be. But an important distinction, certainly. And I think, if a student has that counselor and that person to go see them, make sure you have your list of questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Or, at the same time, boy, there's a lot of resources that could be accessed outside
absolutely
as well.
A lot of resources. This has been candid, awesome advice. Great stuff. I think the listening audience is going to love this episode. So thank you very much for your time today. Obviously, if you want to understand more about Malvern, you can go to malvernprep.org and you can check out all of their admissions policies. Because you guys, the cool part, like you got an admission process in your own right. You don't just go there. So check it out. There's financial aid at Malvern as well,
Most
right?
definitely.
So you guys you're sort of that precursor. People have had that experience, which I think is awesome. And same, I'm not going to plug Devin on a Malvern podcast, but check that stuff out. Yeah. So, Mr. Harkness, thank you so much. I think it was awesome.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the invite.
You got it. All right, everybody. It's been College Knowledge. We want to help. Send your questions to info@collegeknowledge.net. These can be about college, finances, careers, and anything else you have questions on.